Welcome to Communicating with Clarity with Tom Borg. I think that needs a restart. Welcome to Communicating with Clarity with Tom Borg. As you can see, I think I need some help with communicating with clarity. Tom is somebody that I have worked with before, and he was very popular on a previous webinar that we had a year ago, where people said they would like to have him back to talk again. And so I thought, well, let's just do it. So let me tell you a little bit about Tom. He is the founder of Tom Borg Consulting, and he lives in Michigan. He's an employee performance and customer experience expert, and he's been doing a lot of consulting, mentoring, and strategic work to assist businesses and organizations to become more profitable. He's had a lot of very big name clients, and you can see some of the clients in the chat box. You'll see some of his clients he's worked for example, the Detroit Metropolitan Airport and Chrysler Corporation. So really important clients think that Tom Borg is someone that they can really learn from. And I agree, because he's wonderful. And he's also a monthly guest on the Small Business Association Michigan radio show, and has been featured many times on WWJ News Radio. And he recently released a new book. He has other things that he's written, but his new book is called True Small Business Brilliance, and he will be featuring that book a few months later in another webinar where we do a feature. We do a feature business and feature book every year, and so that will be our featured book for the year. He's also published articles in Crain's Detroit Business and Entrepreneur magazine, and I have noticed his articles in Inc. as well, which is a great magazine, and I don't know if he knows that they're being picked up by Inc., but they are. That's really great. So Tom and his wife also have a couple of miniature schnauzers, and I think that gives you enough background for me to be able to let Tom take away the webinar and explain what he would like to tell us about communicating with clarity. So welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for taking the time to create this presentation and to be here for all of us on this webinar.
Well, thank you, Marie, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to welcome all the attendees, and looking forward to presenting some ideas I think that will really help you go to the next level when it comes to communication. So let's start out. Howard Hill. Howard Hill was probably one of the greatest archers that ever lived. He was so good that when he would enter a tournament, he could literally take an arrow out of his quiver, aim at the target, and hit the target right smack dab in the bullseye. He'd take another arrow out of his quiver, aim and fire, and literally split the first arrow that he shot. The man was so good that when he would enter a tournament, other top archers would withdraw because they knew they could not win. This guy was just that good. However, if Howard Hill was here today, and I gave you a little instruction on how to shoot a bow and arrow, whether you've shot one or not before, I could have you out shooting Howard in just about 15 minutes. You might say, well, how's that possible? Well, very simple. We'd take a blindfold, and we'd blindfold Howard Hill. We'd spin him around until he got so dizzy he almost fall over. And then we'd hand you the bow and arrow and wait as we would watch Howard take shots at the target, which you would miss because you couldn't see it. But you, when you got up there, you'd aim, you'd shoot, you'd hit that target, and you'd do much better than Howard Hill. So here's my point. In the program today, we're going to share some ideas with you, some strategies that are going to help you be more specific in being able to deliver crystal clear communication. So with that said, let's get rolling here. First and foremost, I do want to say that there's a workbook that has been sent to you. If you have printed that off, that's even better. You can kind of write in the answers that I've provided there for to fill in the blank approach, so be able to do that. If you don't do it now, you can do it later, because as Marie mentioned, we will be this program is being recorded. You could play it back later and record those answers. So with that said, you'll also notice that the answers on the slides that will be coming up are going to be color-coded, so you know exactly which words to put in there. So, with that said, I am going to turn to the very first page of the workbook, and before we actually get started with that, I do want to add one more bit of information, and that is recently the Holmes report reported that the high cost of miscommunication in the workplace. Here's what they said.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yes.
a few people have said that they haven't seen the slides move yet, and I think that's because the slides haven't moved.
Nope, yeah.
So anybody that's concerned about the slides not moving, there will be one coming up very shortly.
Yep.
Tom's just giving you the introduction to the webinar right now.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, that's exactly right. So a little bit of information about this Holmes report on the importance of good communication. It reports that poor communication costs $37 billion per year. Total estimated cost of employee misunderstanding, including actions or errors of omissions by employees who have misunderstood or are misinformed about company policies, business processes, job function, or a combination of the three. In a 100,000 employee companies, among 400 surveyed corporations in the US and UK, average cost per company is $62.4 million per year, and for employees it's $26,041 cumulative cost per worker per year due to productivity losses resulting from communication barriers. So with all of that said, let's move to our first slide and let's talk about what is a good definition for communication. So what the dictionary tells us, one, it's to impart or transmit, it's to give information, it's to be in agreement with or about, it's able to confer, converse, chat, or speak together. That's all part of it. And whatever else you would want to add to that definition, that's all part of the definition for communication. So with that as a starting point, let's move ahead. So total communication. Total communication consists of four things. Let's take a look. First, writing, reading, speaking, and listening. Now, of course, writing would include everything from text to emails to written messages that you write out, notes, just anything under that category. So that's writing. Second, reading. All right, that's things you read. Could be these other texts you're reading or emails or whatever. Speaking, that's where you're actually speaking to another person. You're doing the talking. And then finally, listening. So let's just see how they stack up. First and foremost, out of most individuals' day, writing would only make up about 9% of their actual communication. Reading, on the other hand, 16%. Speaking, that's where you're doing the talking, 30%. Now, are you ready for this? Listening, as you can guess, 45% of the communication process. So someone once said, well, we do have two ears. Maybe that's telling us something. And that is, if we're really working at listening, we're really doing a better job of communicating. Too often I know it happens to me from time to time, I'm listening to another person. I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say next to that individual. Well, that's not good listening. Good listening is being totally in the present moment and absorbing everything that person has to say. Now, I'll give you some more ideas on what listening is in the communication process, but let's move ahead to the next slide. So how about this? When the words are inconsistent with the tone of voice and body language face-to-face communication consists of. Now I should add, this comes from Dr. Albert Mehrabian, professor at UCLA. He did some studies on communication. He wrote a book called Silent Messages, and in it he came up with some percentages. So let's take a look at these percentages. First and foremost, what makes up communication? Words. How we say those words, and body language. So here's what he's saying now. This is important because this has been misquoted many times in the past. I've seen this in books and seminars. When the words are inconsistent with the tone of voice and body language, face-to-face communication consists of these three things. Now let me give you the percentages. Words are going to make up only 7% of the message. That's right. Even though you say certain words, they're only making up 7% of the message. How about this? How we say those words make up 38%. For example, if I were to say to you, I never said he stole the money. Now that's a statement, but I can change what that statement means by how I say those words. So if I say it this way, I never said he stole the money, well, that would imply that I didn't say it. Maybe Marie said it or someone else said it. How about if I say it this way? I never said he stole the money. Oh, I might have implied it. I might have pointed to some evidence, but I didn't actually say it. How about if I say this? I never said he stole the money. Oh, maybe he borrowed it. Who knows? But what I'm saying is I'm changing that meaning of that sentence. And finally, I never said he stole the money. Oh, he stole something else. So that's just a quick little example of how we say those words can definitely alter the meaning of the message. And finally, the last one, body language. That makes up 55%. Now, body language, as we know, are things like facial expressions, how we move our eyes. Our body language also includes our arms. If we keep them open or folded, they can be indicators of what we're actually saying. Now, you might have your arms crossed in a room, and as you're listening to another person speak, and that could infer that you're defensive to what's being said. On the other end of it, maybe it infers that the room is kind of cold and you're chilly. So that means you need to clarify the body language that comes across. So that's pretty basic information we're covering here, but so often it's overlooked and we don't realize it. My suggestion is the next time you're having a conversation with someone, check your own body language, because that will do a lot to reinforce the message you're trying to give.
So Tom, do you think this might be a good time for us to do the first poll and see if they remember
Yes.
about communication? Okay,
Let's do
so
that.
I will put the first poll up and see if people remember what a good definition of communication is that
Okay.
you already said. So the poll should be up now, and we're viewing it, and so people should be able to click. So if you wouldn't mind clicking, keep clicking, because I won't be able to see. So a few people have started, but let's see, a few more people keep on clicking so that we can see what your opinion is. Check. You can have one or more of these. So see what you can do. Keep going. We're getting closer. We're almost at 80%. Let's see if we can get to 100% of all the people that are on here clicking on it. It's getting close, getting close. Woohoo! It's still moving quite quickly, Tom, so that's why I'm not closing the poll. All right, so the movement has stopped, and it looks like we're closing the poll. So we're going to close it, and then we'll show the results. And the results are 29% think to impart or to transmit, 11% think it's giving information, 4% think it's being in agreement with somebody, and 57% think it's about confer, converse, chat, or speak together. So do you want to give us, what do you think, Tom?
Well, I think it could be all of those things together, and it depends certainly on the situation. But I think the main thing is, a good definition for communication is imparting information. It's being in agreement with, and it's really connecting with that other person, so each person understands what the other person is trying to communicate.
So you're basically saying that all those things are necessary.
I think it all adds up. It all adds up.
That sounds great. Okay, I'm going to hide the results now so we can go back to the slide. And we should be back to the slide now. And I think you can go ahead.
All right,
Thanks,
listen. You're welcome. Thank you, Marie. Okay, let's go on to the next question. That's number 4. And where do we have the opportunity to communicate throughout the day? So here's the question. I want you to think to yourself right now, well, geez, where do you communicate throughout the day when you're talking to other people, how you're communicating with them? And with that in mind, let me give you a couple that I've come up with. First, verbally, face-to-face. Certainly when you're seeing someone, you're talking with them, you're in the physical presence of them, that's a place to communicate. Next, body language. That's another place we communicate throughout the day with our body language. We just might be using our body to infer that we accept what a person's saying or that we are in agreement. So that's a way we do it. Another place we do it is by telephone, right? We're on the telephone, we're on our iPhone, we're communicating with people. That certainly is a way to do it. Oh, can't forget about emails. That's always part of it. And then add that to it, texts. I was just reading something the other day. It's actually mind-boggling how many texts are being sent every day. I mean, it's in the billions now. So that's another way we're communicating throughout our day. And of course, the last way is written messages, which again can be in the form of an email, can be actually written out on a sheet of paper or a note to somebody to remember to pick up some bread and milk at the corner store on the way home. So again, these are places we have the opportunity to communicate throughout the day. All right, let's go on to number 5. All right, so why is it important to have clear communication? Well, let me tell you the story. There's a young guy, we'll call him a millennial. He was driving home from work one evening. It was just it's about this time of year. It's probably going around 6:30ish. It was just starting to get dusk, and he's driving along the expressway, just driving along at a good clip of 100 kilometers per hour. And all of a sudden, bang! He hears this loud noise, and sure enough, flat tire. His rear driver's side tire had gone out. He struggles to pull the car over to the side of the road. He gets out, looks at the damage. Yeah, he's going to have to change the tire. So he goes into the trunk, rummages around, finds his jack, and he gets that spare tire out, and he goes over now to try to loosen those lug nuts before he gets the jack all set. And these lug nuts haven't come off in a long time, so they're kind of rusted on there. Kind of tough, very, very difficult for him to turn. So he's getting a little nervous now because it's getting a little dark, and he figures he better put his headlights on so everybody can see him. Cars coming on the expressway or people coming from the other direction, so he can be seen. So he starts working on these lug nuts, and he's grunting, and finally, with a lot of effort, he finally gets all these lug nuts off, changes the tire, and he's so upset. His clothes are all messed up, dirty. He takes that flat tire and his jack, he just throws it into the trunk, slams the trunk lid, gets into his car, and of course, you can guess what happened. He had a dead battery. Lights were on too long. So checks his cell phone. Well, guess what? His cell phone doesn't work because that's dead. He hadn't recharged it, and he didn't have a charger for it. So now what is he going to do? Beside himself, he gets out of the car, starts waving a white rag, and sure enough, good fortune shines down on him, and a little old lady pulls up right behind him. She rolls down her window, and she says, "What can I do to help you, Sonny?" And he explains the situation, and they ask, "Ma'am, do you have a pair of jumper cables?" Well, she shook her head, didn't have those things. And then he thought for a moment, and he said, "Well, is it possible that, I've got a manual shift car here, and our bumpers line up. I'll bet you, yeah, I'll tell you what to do. Listen, if you can get me up to 25 miles an hour, I'll have my car in neutral. I'll have, get me up to 25 miles an hour, I can pop the clutch and I'll start the car that way." Just a good way of doing it. So she looked at him like he was from Mars. She just did not understand what he was saying. She said, "Ma'am, it's easy. I've got a manual shift transmission car, so if you get me up to 25 miles an hour, I'll have it neutral. I'll pop the clutch and we'll be able to start my car. I'll be good to go." So reluctantly, she agrees. He's all excited. He gets back into his car, shuts the door, and he puts it in neutral, and now he's waiting for her to give her a push. He's waiting, and he's waiting, and he's waiting, and he looks, and in his rearview mirror, he sees the woman in her car coming right at him at 25 miles an hour. Now, what happened? Well, she did exactly what he told her to do, but he didn't really want her to do it that way because it caused some damage. So that's just as easy as it is. We have these collisions all the time throughout our day with communication. We just don't realize what we say isn't necessarily what's been heard on the other side. So with that said, let's take a look at our slide here. Why is it important to have clear communication? First, it's going to save time, no doubt about it. At work, at home, when we're communicating with people, if they get it the first time, they're going to go ahead and do what we expect more likely the first time, and there won't be an opportunity for some problems there. Now, secondly, it prevents stress and frustration. So if something's not done properly on the job, that means someone's got to pay for getting it done right the second time. Whoever did it the first time, going to have to try it again. They're going to have to be paid, compensated. Maybe you have customers or clients that have been put in a situation where they couldn't receive certain product or services, and they're stressed and they're frustrated. That might even cost you a client or a customer because of that situation. In addition to all that, it just gets things done. So why is it important to have clear communication? It just gets things done. Remember that figure we gave you back a little bit ago? That was like $37 billion a year is wasted because of miscommunication. Hard to believe. Okay, let's move ahead. Number 6, what are some barriers to clear communication? So let's figure out what causes these things to go out of line to begin with. So let's take a look. First and foremost, behavior styles. You know, we're all different. We have different types of behavioral styles. Someone might be a driver type where they're real aggressive or assertive and they want things done yesterday and they're loud and sometimes they can be perceived as being demanding. Well, that's a behavior style. Another type of behavioral style is when a person is outgoing and they're a people-oriented person, they're high energy. So that's a barrier that can come across to a person that might be on the shy and introverted side. They might not be able to interface with that type of a behavioral style very well. Or maybe you have a person that's very analytical, right? An analytical person sometimes can drive a driver type, person that's assertive and wants things yesterday, can drive them crazy, you see, or her crazy. So behavior styles, that's a big part of it. Next, another barrier is people just aren't really listening. Sometimes they are distracted, so that's a possibility, but they're just not really listening. Maybe they were thinking about something else, but that's a barrier to communication. Next, interruptions. I don't know about you, but it's easy to be interrupted today. Before we started this webinar, I turned off my phone, I turned off my landline, I turned off my customer CRM program, so I wouldn't have any interference from that or any dings or dongs. So we get interruptions all day long. We have people coming in our office, we have people calling us on the phone, texting us, emailing us, who knows what. So there's plenty of interruptions. That's a barrier because you can't focus. It's been said that if once we get interrupted, it takes at least 20 minutes to get back into where we were before in a very high mode of concentrated work. So interruptions can really be a problem. Next, anger. Now here's a whole nother dimension. Let's say you're just not having a good day. Someone's upset you, maybe a customer, a client, maybe an employee or a supervisor. This all goes into the mix of causing barriers to communication. So we have to be careful with our emotions. That can cause issues. And then finally, hidden agendas, right? People have a hidden agenda. Maybe they're just concerned about the last time they communicated with you or they had a situation with you that wasn't resolved properly. So they're still harboring this chip on their shoulder. Maybe they're just not happy with the relationship at that point. Or maybe they're understanding that there's other things that are going on in their workplace that they're going to need to take care of, and as a result, they're not going to be able to focus totally on you right now because they've got other things that are on their mind. So all these things. Now, if you wanted to add something else to the pile, you can do that too. There's all kinds of barriers out there. We need to be aware of these barriers, clear them out of the way so we can do a better job of communicating. Let's walk on to the next slide. And here's something that this is worth exploring here today. The golden rule versus the platinum rule. Now, the golden rule, as most of us know, that's to do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. So you do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Treat other people the way you want to be treated is another way of saying it. Hey, that works very well. It's been around for centuries. But there's an even better rule that I like, and that's the one by Dr. Tony Alessandro. You've probably heard of it. It's called the platinum rule. And that simply says, do unto others as they want to be done unto, which simply means that they don't necessarily want to be treated the way you would want to be treated in that situation. So how can that happen? Well, oftentimes we can see that where we have different ethnic groups, right? Different ethnic groups have different expectations, and that can cause concerns. How about different age groups? Well, you have your millennials, you have your Xers, as they call them. Let's say the boomers are between 46 and 65. Then you got your Xers, which are born between 65 and 80. Then you got your millennials that are born between 1980 and 1998. And now you've got a new generation called the Linksters. These are the people who are being born after that. So there are differences there that are going to cause problems. So in addition to that, if you're a person that lives in downtown Toronto, you might have a little different outlook on things than someone that lives in rural Canada. So what we're saying is you've got to be able to look at things from other people's perspectives, and that's very, very important. Okay, in addition to all
Tom,
of that...
I'm going to interrupt you just a little bit.
Sure.
So maybe we want to ask a question of the audience at this point.
Do. Let's go.
I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind going back to the previous slide. It's the one where you before the platinum rule. Yeah, I was just wondering if other people who are listening on the call right now, if they have had some, if they want to add some of the barriers to clear communication, because when you had that blank that came up, I thought, oh, that would be great to hear what other people have to say about what communication barriers they've experienced. For example, one that I've experienced is, and you touched on it just briefly, is that cultural differences. So people will have a different expectation for how things should be. Or perhaps somebody tells a joke that's translated out of their language and it doesn't translate so well. And that can cause a barrier too. So I'm just wondering if other people can put some barriers in there. And Diane just added one. She said impatience.
Please.
Impatience is a barrier. If somebody else want to add a few more, let's just maybe get a few from the audience. What other kinds of barriers to communication have you experienced? And then pretty soon, Tom's going to be moving into the solutioning portion really soon. We're getting close there. You saw when you saw the platinum rule, you knew that we were moving to solutions. So keep a few more. Personal history. Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. So Jennifer said you can have your own personal history or your history with another person. Can definitely be a barrier to clear communication. I'm doing a new contract right now, and they have these team huddles, 3 of them every morning, one at 8:30, one at 8:45, and one at 9. And they tell these inside jokes, and I haven't caught a single one of them. So it's been a whole week. I've missed every single joke because they all have a personal history with each other, and there are only 2 new people on the team, me and one other guy. So that's definitely a good one. So one more, and then we can go back. Oh, we've got 2 more. Language barrier. Beautiful. Yeah, language for sure, because you think you've understood something, but you're not entirely sure because the language is not your first language. It could be your second, third, or fourth or more languages. And prejudice. Berna said sometimes people they're just prejudiced against the person who's speaking. That's certainly happened to probably everybody who's, that happens where somebody just already assumes you don't know anything or that you're not the person for the job and they've already got prejudice. So those are great, and I just wanted to check in. And go ahead with your presentation, Tom, and we can maybe get to some of the solution parts soon.
You bet. Thank you, Marie, for doing that. That's important, and I love those. I've added those to my list, the language and prejudice. Those certainly are things that can cause some problems. Okay, so talking about this platinum rule, so we understand that as well. And let's see here. Okay, so let's move on to number 8. All right, so how about this? A real quick, short, easy rule on the do's and don'ts of email correspondence. And it's real simple. We're not going to go into an encyclopedia of suggestions. Just one. Very simple. Just don't send anything you wouldn't put on the front page of tomorrow's newspaper or on a Facebook page. So, real simple. When you have a questionable piece of information you need to communicate to another person, I would recommend, if it's not going to pass this test, then you better get voice-to-voice or face-to-face with that person, face-to-face being preferred, to communicate that bit of information. So just a very simple tool. If you get anything out of today's program, that may be the best one right there. Yeah, like I said earlier about the different generations we have working in the workplace, not all people are on the same page when it comes to that business about communicating through email. So just something to think about. Okay, so let's move ahead. Some more answers for us. Here are some tips on listening more effectively. Now remember, we said back in the beginning, listening was what? 45% of the whole process. So maybe if we learned how to listen more effectively, we would even be better communicators. So let's take a look at some tips. First, 9A, judge content, not delivery, right? This is important. Too often, it's easy, as we said a moment ago, that suggestion about being prejudiced. That happens all the time. People are starting to judge the content based on the individual, or just being based on the way the person has an accent or anything else, you see. So judge content, not delivery. That's important. Next on the list would be delay evaluation. Sometimes we think we know what the person is going to say, or we've already come to a conclusion of what we think about what they're beginning to tell us about, but we don't even have all the facts yet. So it would be important under 9B is to delay your evaluation. You'll do a better job of listening and as a result communicating. Next on the list.
Tom, in the middle of your the one that you just said with your listening, I
Yeah,
just saw a poster this morning that I thought I'd just jump in and tell about the poster. Sorry for
please.
the interruption.
I love it.
The poster is based on the word think.
Uh-huh.
So, and it says, before you speak or write, ask yourself, T, is it true? H, is it helpful? I, is it inspiring or insightful? N, is it necessary? And K, is it kind? And that's along the word think. So T, is it true? H, is it helpful? H, is it inspiring or insightful? And N, is it necessary? K, is it kind? I thought that was so cool I had to tell you about it.
I like that. I'm writing that down. Very good. I'm always learning. Appreciate that. Like it. Okay, well let's go to the next one here. We had okay, so see, listen for ideas. So again, by looking at the whole picture, listen for ideas that are coming from this other person that you can identify with. That's important. Listen for ideas. Next, D, be flexible. Be willing to change your mind. Change is important. Now, sometimes people would rather be right than be happy. You've probably heard that before. And sometimes we just need to change our mind. It doesn't matter that we have a certain opinion. If we look at it from the other person's perspective or for the greater good, we're going to see some real progress there. You know, we're not going to be stuck. So be willing to change your mind. That's the mark of a leader, someone that's willing to be flexible. Now, here's a tough one here for a lot of us. Sometimes it's actively listening. Just work at it. Actively work at listening. So, in other words, tune out the other distractions. If you're sitting in front of your computer, you turn your computer monitor off, or you turn away from the computer and tune into the person that's standing in front of you. Or maybe if you're talking to them on the telephone, just really tune into what they're saying, what they're actually communicating without being distracted. It's so easy to do that, even during these webinars. If we're not careful, we start looking at our iPhone, text messages, whatever, and that doesn't do anything for communication, the way we're trying to learn at that point. So, next. F, resist distractions. That goes right along with this business of the things that could come up and just distract us from actually focusing in on what the person is saying to us. So any type of distractions, whether it be loud noises or whether it be communication in another room or somebody that's getting boisterous, whatever, we need to just kind of focus in on that individual, resist those distractions, close the door, whatever it takes to be focused on that individual. And then, as we said earlier, keep your mind open. You know, that's like a parachute. It works best when it's open. So keep your mind open, keep your mind, try to eliminate the opinions that you have. You'll be surprised at what you can learn by just keeping your mind open. So these are all powerful tools. Okay, let's move ahead here. And there'll be time for more questions and answers later. We're not going to go right to the hour today. We'll have plenty of time for some free time there if we like. So here's some more solid techniques. Again, listening. Remember, 45% of the process. Here's some tips. I call it the ladder process. Here's one, Marie. Maybe you've heard this before. But the L stands for look at the person. Now, don't look at the wall. Look at the person. Look in them in the eye. Pick one eye and look at the eye. And this way, you can really connect. They tell us that the eyes are the windows to the soul. And they are in many ways. However, when you look at the person, it just tells them that they're the most important thing at that point, that you are focusing in on them. So look at them. Critical to establishing trust and rapport is a good eye-contact. Now, you don't want to stare at them through the whole time, but good, comfortable eye contact. Very important. Next, ask questions. You know, sometimes it's so easy to just want to give your opinion and tell them this or tell them that, but when you're telling, you're not learning. So ask questions. And I oftentimes tell my clients or my audiences that there's a couple of types of questions, and you've probably heard of these before. Two types are, one is open-ended. That's where you ask a question that requires more than a couple of words to answer. An example of an open-ended question might be, well, what happened next? Or how did you feel about that? Or how do you mean? So these are just questions that are going to require the other person to give you more than just a couple of words to fully answer the question. Now, close-ended question, and there's a time and place for those as well, that would be something that would require a one-word answer, like, what color was it, red or blue? Were you happy with it? Yes or no? Are you finished yet? Yes or no? So those are some questions that you can ask in terms of the types. Open-ended, which require several words to answer. How do you mean? Give me an example. Tell me more. Could you tell me more? And then close-ended questions, which would require a simple 1 or 2 word response. So again, this is going to facilitate the process of communication. It's going to facilitate that person being able to communicate their ideas. Let's look at another part of our formula here. The first D is don't interrupt. It's so easy to want to do that. You know, we think a lot faster than anybody can speak. I think the average person thinks between something like 500 to up to 2,000 words a minute. That's how fast they process information. They can, this internal dialogue going on in their head. And the average person can only speak between 75 and 125, 130 words a minute. So what happens in that meantime between the words? Our brain is racing ahead, thinking about what we want to say, and thus the temptation to want to interrupt. You see, so don't interrupt. Completely listen to that other person. Second D, don't abruptly change topics. And I gotta tell you, I've been guilty of that with my wife from time to time. She's trying to tell me about something, and I heard enough, and I want to change the topic. That's not the best thing to do if you want to get the complete communication going and really get the listening up to the level it could be. So don't abruptly change topics. You'll find that your speaker will be much more appreciative and much more complete in what they want to say to you. E, emotions. Be aware of yours and theirs. So what we're saying is when you're communicating with another person, realize that, you know, if you're upset about something or excited about something, that's important to take into consideration. And if they are emotional about something or upset or in a hurry or they're maybe a little bit stressed out, these are emotions that we need to pay attention to, and that's going to alter the message that comes across. And finally, R, respond with your body, face, and voice. We talked about that earlier, but open body language, you know, arms uncrossed, good facial expressions, eye contact, your voice, a supportive voice, you know, nods, you know, these things that are going to allow you to send the message that you are listening very well. Powerful, powerful, powerful messages here. Okay, let's go to number 11. So to create clear, ongoing communication, here's a couple of you musts. You must have weekly meetings. You know, you talked about that a minute ago, Marie, about those huddles they have. I love it when a client has those things happening. It's too often you go into a company or an organization and I ask about meetings and they say, well, we don't normally have meetings around here. Really? You know, how do you communicate on a regular basis? It's no wonder they have issues with people not hearing the whole message that the president gave out because it was never formally given out in a meeting, or there's a problem with a particular department and they're looking for some help from another department, and because they don't have these meetings, it creates problems. So I have weekly meetings. I would even have daily huddles, right? Every morning have those opportunities. I was working with a restaurant where they would have not just morning huddles or morning meetings, they would have huddles throughout the day with small groups of people, small groups of employees, and then they'd have one-on-one huddles. So they were constantly communicating back and forth. Boy, that's a great way to run a better business. C, always a temptation. Don't finish the other person's sentences. So easy to want to finish a sentence because the person may be a little slow in completing their thought, or they may be searching for a word. So don't finish other person's sentences. Let them do that on their own accord. D. Let's see, on the next one. So D would be stop multitasking. Instead, focus on the other person. You know, it's kind of funny, but it's not. I was reading a study the other day here that you have 4 times the likelihood of being in an automobile accident if you're texting while driving. Now, at the same time, if you've been drinking and you're driving, you have 4 times as much of a chance to be in an accident. So what you're saying is if a person is texting and driving, they're driving like they're drunk. So when we're multitasking, instead of focusing on the other person, we're in a sense we're listening like we're drunk. We're not really tuning in to what the person has to say because we're being distracted. So again, I'm going to focus on this. It's so easy in today's society to be distracted. Let me give you some quick evidence. If you watch any program on television or any movie, you'll notice that they will not have the same camera angle for more than 3 to 4 seconds, and then they shift. then they shift, and then they shift again. So our brain is conditioned to constantly be stimulated and to focus, just to do some simple focusing. Oh, heaven forbid if we wanted to do some meditation, which is really against the grain of how we operate on a normal basis. So stop multitasking. Instead, focus on the other person. You'll be much better off. E, stop using the words but or however. Instead, substitute the word and. Now let me explain what I mean by that. So I'll say you're talking to somebody and they're trying to explain what they want to do, and you listen to them, you nod your head, you're very good with all of that. Then you throw the but word in there. Say, well, yeah, Joe, but, well, what do? We just negated everything else he said. Or, yeah, sure, that's great. I understand what you're saying. However, oh, I just negated what he said. So maybe a better way, what I'm suggesting, is that instead of throwing the but or the however in there, try this. Say, Joe, I hear what you're saying. And when we stop to think about the other ways we could do this, have you considered, and you lead into whatever answer you might have. What I'm saying is a but and a however is like it's like pulling the plug on your television set. All of a sudden, it just cuts the transmission. So if you can, that's a challenge for a lot of people. Get rid of the word but and however. Instead, use the word and. You'd be surprised at the results. Okay, let's move ahead.
So Tom, this might be, is it now or in a couple of slides should we put in that other poll that you wanted?
Let's put it in now. That would be good. Okay. We can do it right now. Absolutely.
All right. And while I'm getting the poll set up, we also had a comment from Karen, and she said that the newest research says that people are 24 times more likely, rather than 4 times more likely, that now they're 24 times more likely to have an accident if they're texting while they're driving.
Really? Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is very crazy.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, that's good. 24 times.
Thanks for that, Karen.
More
all right, so the poll is up.
Wow. Okay.
And and the question is, when it comes to communicating important information, which form do you think is best? Telephone, email, face-to-face, or third person? And so we've got a lot of people answered this, 48%, 40. We're getting closer and closer and closer. And we're just about at 60%. Keep going, everyone. You're doing great. A few more. 70%. I really like to see that number climb.
Participation, we love it.
It's going to be very heavily weighted to one answer, towards one answer. Okay, we're now past 80%. Awesome. Okay, I think I'm going to close the poll now. And share the results. There we go, face-to-face if it's important information.
Yes, yes. And I'm so glad we got that message. We learned that because it's so easy not to do that today face-to-face. So yes, you are so right. I'm glad you folks answered that question the way you did, because it just tells me you know the value of face-to-face. Although it takes more time to do it and physically to get in the presence of the other person, but boy, does it cut down on the miscommunication and the challenges that come with those problems that follow. So, okay.
And those companies that use email because they're not brave enough to go have a face-to-face conversation end up having nothing but problems as a result.
Oh, yeah. You bet. You bet. And then just think about it. It just creates a chain reaction. So eventually, if they're going to ever resolve it, they're going to need to get face-to-face, but they've wasted all that time and energy and caused all those complications in between. So, okay, let's go to the next one there, and that is F, and that is don't play favorites. You know, I've been in too many companies where you know that certain people are getting special attention, and other people know that, and it does not build teamwork, it does not build an allegiance toward that organization. So if you ever catch yourself playing favorites, I'm going to suggest that you not do that. It's too easy to create that kind of culture where people feel like they're being slighted because they're not the special or chosen one. So don't play favorites. If you do that, you'll be better at be a much more proficient communicator. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide. So if you're in our last webinar, I covered this, but it was from the perspective of customer service. However, in this one, they have a new meaning. So here are 4 critical questions others have for you. Now, some of you, if you were in the last workshop, you remember, but let's see how we can translate. So when you're talking to someone, they have a question for you right off the beginning, and they're not going to ask you the question. They're going to be thinking the question to themselves. And the question is, the first one is, do you like me? So how do you tell people that you like them without telling them that you actually like them? Well, it's your facial expressions. It's, do you smile when they're in your presence? Do you nod your head? Do you really generally show that you like them? And just the way you can respond to them. So that's important, just being able to demonstrate that you like them. Now, the second question they're going to have for you is, do you care about me? So what that means is, hey, have you asked them about their children, how the children are doing at home, or how's their dog, or maybe the last conversation you had with them about the challenge they were experiencing at work. So by remembering some of these things that you had a conversation about or you knew about in the past with them, just lets them know that you are really focusing in on them, that you really value them as a human being and that you care about them. And you know what? These are basic things, according to Maslow, that people all need and crave. They just don't want. They crave that people will like them. They crave that people will care about them. So can you answer that question honestly? Do you really care about that other person you're talking to and demonstrate it? Third one, can I trust you? Right? Now, what does that mean? Well, does that mean you did what you said you were going to do the last time we spoke, or the last time we had that opportunity to work together? So these are things that people are going to be having in their mind. They're going to be asking you these questions. They're not going to ask you verbally, but they're going to be thinking, can I trust this person? Now, she says she wants me to do this, but the last time I came to her for that, she didn't help me out at all. So I don't know why I should trust her in this situation. So again, do you like me? Do you care about me? Can I trust you? Last one. Do you really know what you're doing? So how do you demonstrate your effectiveness as an individual? Do you follow through on what you said you were going to do before? Are you really knowledgeable about the topic you're supposed to be working on? Are you not giving excuses? I got to tell you this. I was called on another magazine some time ago. I do a lot of writing, and I try to get out there and write for different publications. So I contacted this one publication, and the person emailed me back, said, well, you have to send us some information, send me a sample article. So I did. And then she emails me back, she said, well, I've been really busy. I haven't had time to look at it. And so then I email her again. She said, well, it's really been hectic here. I just came back. So all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if this person is really that good at what she's doing. If she's that unorganized that she cannot follow through on a request that she made to me to submit this magazine article to her, I don't know if I want to write for a magazine like that, let alone do all the work and never see it published. So the point here is, do you know what you're doing, and can you demonstrate that? That's your track record. You're as good as your last delivery. So keep that in mind. It's like in the movies. They say you're only as good as your last movie. Well, when it comes to demonstrating your effectiveness as a person, as a coworker, as a leader, do you know what you're doing, and can you demonstrate that? That's what they're asking us. They're not expecting us to answer verbally, but they're just watching what we do and what we have done. So those are the 12 right there. How about this? Let's go on to number 13. Powerful, powerful part of the program here. If you get anything out of it, this may be the number one thing to remember. When two people in business always agree, one of them isn't necessary. Now what that simply means is that if you have people that always agree with you, then they're not telling you the truth, because just ask my wife, I'm not right all the time, and that's a fact. So the idea is, it's okay to disagree with other people. That's what I want to mention to you. It's okay to disagree. The key is, however, is to do it agreeably. So what we're saying is, it's things like, you know what, I see what you're saying, and I think I see it from a little different perspective. Have you ever considered, say, I'm disagreeing, but I'm doing it in an agreeable fashion? So if we can do that, that will build communication. That will allow people to become more communicative and at the same time trust us. So I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. All right. So with that said, that was number 14. Let's go on to number 15. Last little formula I want to share with you here. It's called the 3 T's to speaking. This is powerful. Again, if you can do this with your people, the individuals you're speaking with, you will go a long ways in being able to develop the kind of trust and rapport that we all want, we all need. So here's the first one. first T is when you're going to give instructions to somebody or communicate something to somebody, tell them what you're going to tell them. So it's kind of like a preview at the movies, right? Or on television. They're going to give you what it's going to be about. So tell them what you're going to tell them. Next, give them the message. Tell them. And then finally, tell them what you told them. So let's say you're giving instructions to an individual, and you might say, this is how we're gonna, Joe, I want you to be able to handle this new piece of equipment. So in just a couple minutes, I'm going to go over the steps you need to take to be safe and at the same time be able to do the job properly. So Joe's all ready for this. He's taking notes. His head's nodding. So then you go into the process. You tell him exactly what you want. And finally, when you get through with that part, you go back and you summarize. You just tell him what you told him. You walk back through those steps again, get his agreement, ask if there's any questions. So it's just a really nice way of making sure they get the message. Nobody gets it the first time. Very few people do. So I like this formula because it's a great way to prevent miscommunication by going through the process of communicating them with those 3 T's. So
Tom, that's actually a North American cultural norm. So
is that right?
yeah, because in other countries, people don't necessarily do that. So for those of you who are new to Canada, this is something that's important to know about North American communication. It's in Canada and the US, it's very similar. And it has to do with people explaining very clearly what they want and going from one point to the next, preparing the audience for what you want to tell them, and then reminding them afterwards what you told them. In other countries, that would not be the norm. You would maybe tell a story and you would expect people to derive meaning out of the story. And you could be insulting the audience by telling them what you're going to tell them and then explaining at the end what you just told them. They might feel that perhaps they're not smart enough to figure it out because you had to go to all those great lengths. But in Canada and in the US, this is considered the norm, and it takes some practice. So people who are not used to speaking that way really have to think carefully about what the point is and then actually say the point, even though that's something they may feel is probably uncomfortable and doesn't feel natural to them. So, but you can always insert stories in other contexts, but if you have somebody that needs to follow specific instructions or needs to know some specific information, this is really the best formula to use.
Thank you. That's a good point, Maria, and we do have a global audience here today, so I like that. Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind, obviously, when you're working in North America or communicating with other folks here. So, all right, well, I'll tell you what, here we are at the bottom of the workshop, and I would like you to jot down the best idea that you learned here today that you're going to use. So just jot that down, your workbook on a sheet of paper that you have nearby you. Any of those ideas we talked about, what's the one you're going to promise us that you're going to take out and use? You're going to put it to work and really master the craft of using that. So take a couple moments to do that. And then, Marie, maybe we can have them shoot it up on the screen there. You know, just jot that down.
Yeah, just put it into the chat box, whatever the idea is that you found most useful. And while people are thinking about that, the one that I really liked and which I didn't know anything about was the ladder. The ladder strategy. So I think that I'm going to write that out and put it next to my desk at my office because I think it's quite useful. So that's a good way to remind me of how to get the best kind of listening out of my audience. So
yeah,
I like that one very much.
Yeah,
so
well,
let's see if we've got any other people. So so Karen, she said, remember to focus on other people and don't interrupt was the one that she took away. And then Roya said she really likes the 3 T's of communication that we just ended with. So let's see if we can get a few more people putting up what their favorite thing that they're going to remember from this presentation is. And oh, yeah, we've got some more. So Diana said the 3 T's. Diane said the ladder and using the word and instead of but or however. And Jeff said the same for him. That was the one thing for him. A lot of other people like the 3 T's, probably because we heard it last. Jennifer likes the idea of tuning in, and Jim said make sure you have face-to-face conversation. That's way important. There's just too many workplaces that are pretending that doesn't matter anymore, and it really does matter.
Wow.
So those are really good. Oh, we've got a few more. To disagree, but to do it agreeably is a very big one, and that was Mahagama J, I think. Well, I could be saying that right, wrong. And then Walede is saying let your words be consistent with your tone. And then Mariana said the email do's and don'ts. Wow, people are just shooting them in like crazy. The platinum rule by Shiba, think by Prabhat. Thank you for saying that, Prabhat. I think I interrupted Tom's presentation by jumping in by saying, "Oh, this think thing is so cool." That's just, I should probably have waited till a better time to do that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Like
the like word, I don't know what Dona is. Somebody said Dona. I'm not sure if that's okay. All right. And the idea of a hidden agenda as a barrier of communication. That's one we'll stick with, Diana. So those are really good takeaways from all of this.
Okay.
I'm wondering if anybody has some questions for Tom. And while you're thinking about your questions, I think that Tom is going to put up his contact information. Right, Tom? And then at the very end, we'll have you do another quick poll because we're getting close to the end of the hour here. So Tom has a website, and on his website he has a store. So you can get his books from his store. Do you want to talk about that at all, Tom?
You know what? I'm looking at my slide, and let me make an adjustment to that website. It's actually Tom Borg Consulting, www.tomborgconsulting.com. I just threw that up without realizing that. But it's also on the bottom of that workbook too, my contact information. But yeah, if you want to go to my website, of course you could go to tomborg.com too. That's why I've got two URLs. So either one, that works. That would work. To purchase my books and CDs, go to the store tab on at my website and you can see what I have to offer. Or if you also, if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, I have a newsletter that goes out once a month. It's aimed at businesses on a variety of employee performance topics and ideas. So if you'd like to subscribe to that, just go ahead and email me and I will be happy to put you on the list. You can unsubscribe at any time, but it's always chock full of great ideas. I usually have a video in there, a short video and a short radio interview that I'm on. And then there's an article. So there's 3 forms of learning on there from 3 different topics through those means. So feel free to do that. I'm always willing to share my ideas, and if you'd like to subscribe, feel free to do that.
Yeah, we're featuring one of Tom's blogs on our Shift website this week, and you'll get an invitation to that. And that was also one of the PDFs. And I just wanted to go through what the people are saying here. So we've got more people saying the ladder technique was important to them, and then Prabhat said making the listener feel valued was important for him. And then Mashoud said, would you kindly summarize at the end to do a little summary of what you've said? And I think that, yes, and then we have another question from Jen. So maybe I like the idea of the summary.
Sure.
If you want to do a quick summary,
I sure can.
Maybe 3 to 5 key points?
Sure. I think if we were to put this all together, I think one of the keys is that when you're communicating with other people, I could say it this way: people don't care how much you know. This is what I heard once from not Dr., but Cavett Robert, a great speaker at one point. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Now, what I mean is that that's really the essence of good communication, clear communication, is when you can impart that you sincerely care about the person, about the message. That's the base. That's the base for building trust and a real open communication. Now, as far as the other things go, I think the key is to remember that we all have feelings and we need to be able to communicate to other people in a way that is going to be the best form that's going to reach them. And we mentioned before different styles of people's behavior, or maybe different ethnic groups. These are things we need to take into consideration when we're communicating to other people, or their age groups, or where they're from. At the same time, when you start to think about communication, I'd also suggest that it never stops. We should always be looking at how we're communicating in so many different ways, whether it be on the phone or whether it be in person. Sometimes we communicate by not communicating. You know what I mean? When someone emails you or phones you and you don't get back to them, that's a form of communication, that you don't care or that you don't have an answer, but be careful with that. So that's, I think, another part of this whole summary that we're looking at. And then I guess the key is to make sure you continue to communicate on a regular basis. I think if we can do that and to clarify things as we go, that's going to do a lot, or go a long ways in preventing future miscommunication. So if we could summarize it, I would do it that way. I think I want to close, though. I'll open any other questions, but one last quote I want to use here, and I think about communication because it can be frustrating at times. It can cause problems if we don't do it right. But I love this quote. It goes like this: True happiness, that's true happiness, is not the absence of problems. True happiness is resolving those problems. So as we think about our careers, our relationships, about our jobs, our families, look at resolving those conflicts. That's where the real happiness is going to come. Marie?
Yeah, you know, I really like the way you summarize this, Tom, because to me, what you're saying essentially is that the most important part of communication is paying attention to the other person and
Mm-hmm.
responding appropriately to them.
Mm-hmm.
And and then if you need to make adjustments in the way you're presenting the information, then do that so that the other person can get it. So
Mm-hmm.
and continuous improvement, that none of us are perfect communicators and we all need to improve. And if we reflect back on how we've done things and say, what could I do better next time, that's probably a good way to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have one more question that I would love to throw in there because I think it's a good one.
Sure. Love
And
to hear it.
it's what are one or two ways you can use to open up somebody who's a really closed communicator? So someone who tends not to share, you know, and really sticks to themselves. Do you have a suggestion for dealing with someone like that?
Well, I think one would be to find some kind of common ground you would have with that individual, whether it be where they're from, hobbies they might have, whether they have children and you have children, or maybe they have certain experience. I think if we can find some common ground, it might mean some research on your part or asking a few questions. That I think is a great place to help open up the door to better communication. When people feel that you're a little like them, there's some things you have in common, that can go a long ways into opening up. Now, the second thing could be to find out some things about the other person that are pretty notable. It might be that the person had a certain degree, or maybe they've had so many years of experience, and compliment them on what it is that they have. Show some respect in the form of a sincere compliment. That's a great way to help warm people up, soften them up a bit. And here's the biggest one: don't assume. Sometimes we assume because people are quiet that they don't like us, or that they're being smug, or maybe that they don't know something. That could be furthest thing from the truth. The fact is that when people are quiet or introverted, they may have their reasons for it, and until you know what those reasons are, you really can't assume. So I think it's a big part right there.
Thank you. Those are some very good suggestions. So I'm going to share the results of the poll, which I just asked, which is
Okay.
this webinar content is something I'll definitely use. So these are the results. We've got 55% saying totally agree, and then 36% saying they agree, and then 9% saying that they somewhat agree. Nobody said that they disagreed, so I'm really glad that this webinar was valuable for you. We do have another one coming up next month, which is going to, we will get an invitation to that webinar in the follow-up email, and that's where we also have the survey. And of course the survey results will go to Tom afterwards so that he can do his own continuous improvement.
Yes,
And
absolutely. I love that.
and so we're just going to end with that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Tom, for your presentation. It was really, really helpful. Lots of good practical tips.
So
You will
welcome.
all get, yeah, you will all get copies of the slides and Tom's a little workbook, which is actually sort of a questionnaire for you that you can use for the slides, and
Hmm.
then also the PDF of the article that he wrote, which will also be featured on our Shift blog this week. So again, thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
It's really nice to have you on, and thank you everybody for participating. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the week.